Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And this is the last video in my coverage of Tamora Pierce's The Circle of Magic Quartet. So this is Briar's book. If you have not seen the first three reviews, I advise you to check them out. Otherwise, this isn't going to make much sense. These books do, in fact, have to be read in order. So this story takes place, they've gone from, this is after Deja's book, so they've returned from the north. And it's near, I think, the end of, no, it's almost a year later. In fact, it is a year later. Briar is going into the town, in particularly the Mire, which is the poorer area of the city, on the outskirts of the walls. Now, again, he was a street rat, so he goes with Rosethorn, who is definitely devoted to charity work, despite the fact she hates it. And she goes to this house of healing to help out and refresh their medicines and things like that. And Briar goes with her as a break and to kind of wander around. He's made friend with a little girl by the name of Allie Pup, who's similar to what he was when, and he's kind of a touch of his past without, getting back into being a thief. And the girls also complain that when he goes there, and Rosethorn does too, that one, he always seems to come back slightly dirty, and two, he's all the learning and how to speak properly seems to have gone out of his head, and they have to re-civilize him again. So I think this takes place nearly a year after he's been basically learning to be a plant mage. So he goes with her around this time, not to mention Sandri's bugging him to pick a birthday. He doesn't remember when he's born, so he's basically being bugged by Sandri because she's a noble girl and she wants to celebrate birthdays, so she's bugging him about it. So he goes down with Rosethorn with her packages of medicines. Rosethorn ends up getting pissed off because it turns out one of their people who have been volunteering or working there has stolen a bunch of stuff that she's been bringing there for months. But then Briar goes off to meet this little girl, Allie Pup, and one of her friends catches him and says, "She's sick. Can you come?" And so he brings her to this kind of hovel, I think, in the sewers, and she has spots. So yeah, this is a plague book. So he goes and contacts. He's able to touch such plants and use his magic to reach out to Rosethorn. So he goes in following different plants to get to Rosethorn, and she can see through his eyes. And she's like, "Oh, crap. Where are you? And I'm coming to get you." So she comes and sees this girl, realizes something is up, and they get her to the House of Healing, and they go into, basically, this is quarantine procedures. So they're going up the back stairs into this basically black blocked off area. And Rosethorn's not happy because now she's stuck with Briar and sick people. And she's having to tend to sick people. Rosethorn does not like to tend to sick people because Rosethorn. But she's also an expert in how to deal with these pock diseases and plagues. So they're stuck back there and doing all sorts of interesting magical scientific procedures, gathering evidence and things, and then sending samples out to be examined. Now, the other main character, I haven't mentioned him before, is Crane. He actually shows up in the first book harassing Briar because he has a fancy greenhouse, which pisses Rosethorn off because he's trying to grow plants out of season. And she says they don't taste as good because they're grown out of season. She's a plant mage. I think he's a water mage. And basically they have competition. They've been in competition since they were young, since before they basically took their different names. He's related to some nobleman. You find this out. They hate each other. And Crane does not like Briar because Briar, he's of the upper class, and Briar was a street rat and a thief. And he was also very, very interested in the greenhouse. So he's stuck. Crane's actually stuck harassing people, because him and Rosethorn are the ones who are experts in trying to find cures for these diseases and tests for them. And Rosethorn's stuck in quarantine. So you kind of see the story evolve where they're stuck in quarantine. Allipup dies, and eventually the entire House of Healing ends up in quarantine, and they're trying to figure this out. And everybody's working, including back in Winding Circle. And the girls are upset because Briar's there and they miss him. And Sandra just doesn't like it. She doesn't like her group being broken up like this. So Tress goes along with Nico, and they try to figure out, okay, they're trying to trace through this. And you also find out that Nico doesn't like to be dirty. So they're going through these sewers, and he's just kind of freaking out. And Tress actually is kind of being ornery, and then she realizes that Nico hates being dirty. She looks at him, and she makes all the water go away. And he's like, fine. It's like, I can accept this. And they find out that this kind of minor mage, who doesn't really have any training, had dumped her magical concoctions into the sewer. And she was trying to create a weight loss drug. And essentially, that's the reason it contains willow bark, which it resists fever. So that's the reason they're having issues breaking the fever, is because she was trying to design a weight loss drug. And it's like, if you suddenly get a fever, all it goes, basically, it doesn't work. So they figure out that this contains magic. Now, how they figure this out is, trying to think, if Briar sends, Tress is bored. She has nothing to do. And so she, I think at this point, he's out. Because they get, basically, once they realize it's in the entire city, they break quarantine, and they have a test for it. So Crane's at least figured out he's had a test for it. So they're able to go home. And you see the first real inkling that there's a relationship between Lark and Rosethorn. Yes, they are a lesbian couple. You don't really see a lot of it. It's not really brought up until they hug at the end of this, in this scene when they get back to the temple, and the girls hug Briar. But then the next morning, it's like, yeah, we have to go deal with Crane. And Crane is pissed off because Rosethorn is bringing Briar with him. It's like, he's my assistant. He's mine. I'll deal with him. You don't. And just behave. So they're in there. And Crane has issues with terrorizing people who were writing the notes down. So he has dismissed this poor person. I think she was a nurse. She's just not used to dealing with this kind of thing. So Briar brings in Tress, who's extremely accurate, very good with things, and can stand up to Crane. And Briar knows this. But one of the other reasons he's bringing her in is because she sees magic better than anybody, and he's been seeing flashes. And he tells her, and she takes a close look at it. And they alert Crane, and Rosethorn's like, there's magic in these things. And he's like, how the heck do you see this? And Rosethorn's like, their magic was woven together, and Nicolò had previously taught Tress to see magic. So now they all see magic. And so, yeah, he has a look, and they realize, oh, crap, there's magic. So that's why Nico drags Tress off into the mire to try to trace this magic. And that's how they figure out this was a weight loss drug, and it's killed this woman. And she has died. They see her, I think, smelling corpse. They don't go into detail. So the rest of this basic book is people are dying. They're trying to deal with this magical pox plague caused by illegally dumping of magical potions into the sewer system. And Rosethorn actually gets sick. And she nearly dies. So they send her home, and she's very, very sick. And Briar goes in, he's sitting with her, and he realizes that she's going to die. And he goes in after her. It's like, no, you cannot leave me. And their friends follow him. And trying to think, they're in there. They're holding on to each other like mental string, trying to basically prevent her from dying until Moonstream, who's the head of the temple and also a great healer, helps bring Rosethorn basically back. And she can't, however, she can't speak. She's had, she's like, part of my brain died. Essentially, she had a stroke. So she has to learn how to talk again. But she's alive. And it strengthens her bonds with Briar. And it's like, she literally admits in his mind, it's like, I love you. And that's in a whole mother-son relationship thing. So and it's kind of strengthened that bond and realized just how powerful these children are. It's like, they're not supposed to be able to do this. And Moonstream's like, this will never be spoken of again. It's like, no, we don't want people to realize just how powerful the four of them are. And just how scary what they did was. Rosethorn wasn't completely dead, but they brought her back from the brink of death. So, and it does show that there's damage. She had essentially a stroke, and part of her brain died, and she has to learn to speak again. But they also find a cure for this. And it's very interesting the way they show basically medieval magical study, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It shows how long and how difficult it is to break something apart and find different, basically they call them keys, which is the different parts of this disease, in order to find a cure for it. Finding the first one allowed them to find a test for it. And it takes them several weeks working almost constantly to figure this out in this greenhouse. And it's a lot of work. And Crane is very cranky. But it also, the main core of the story is Briar realizes this is his calling, and that he is no longer part of the street rat community, and that he really is devoting himself to being a Green Mage. So that's kind of this. That's why this is the core of his story. You see his background, what he grew up in, and why he still kind of missed that freedom of being able to not be a student and not have to pay attention to how he speaks and how he behaves, and just be a runaround kid just kind of trying to survive in the mire, or where basically the slums of Soat, which is where he's from. And you also really see he loses a close friend, a connection to that world when this young girl dies, and he sees strong people die. And it's kind of a wake-up call. Now, Sandri is freaking, you see part of her is freaking out because she lived, in the first book you learn, her parents died during a smallpox thing in, I can't remember what country it is. Does she show the map in this book? She does, but she's just showing this is the map of the city. So that's Summersea. And I haven't mentioned that. That's the name of the city where they're at. So, in the previous ones, I don't know why. It's been a while since I fully read these books. But that's the core of the story. It's Briar's story, and very much like all three of these, they're coming-of-age stories where they realize this is where they belong. With the exception of almost Sandri. Sandri accepts where she belongs almost kind of from the start. But she realizes how much she loves being a thread mage, and accepts that this is where she is supposed to be, and this is what she's supposed to be doing. So that's the conclusion of this quartet. So you have each of the books that focuses on each one of these children, almost a coming age story, in an event of them learning to accept themselves. Sandri learning to accept that this is where she belongs. She's a thread mage, and her uncle, I believe, very much accepts that, and he's proud of her, and that she has a place, and she's no longer just kind of being wandered around with her parents being useless. And that was her big thing, is she was, in her mind, what she's been told, it's like she was a noble girl. She was completely useless, and her main use was to have babies and marry. Not in that order. And basically she was an asset. And now she realizes as a mage, she has a purpose. She can serve a community. She can create things. She makes her own clothing. In fact, I believe in the second book, they're outfitting Tress because her clothes are ill-fitting. and Sandri, and I think she does that with eventually all of her friends. She gets them all a new wardrobe, and she does this more than once. And then you have Tress, who learning that she really does need to have control over her magic and let go of her past, and Deja accepting her new world, and as well as Briar, similar stories of these two children who are completely out of their element and all learning to accept their new place and their magic. So it's a great series. Tamora Pierce does do a Circle Opens quartet where all 4 friends are separated. Sandri, it does again start with Sandri, where though it does completely focus on her this time because the rest of them are gone. And that's, I think Dancing Steps is actually one of my favorite books in the series. But I will review those come November. If you like this review, I'm doing a bunch of more stuff. Halloween has arrived. Harry Potter will finish up at the end of this month, as it started at the beginning of the month. It will finish up in October, covering all the books, all the films. I'm also doing Dracula and a bunch of other stuff. Check out my October introduction to know exactly what I'm covering. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like what you see, I'm hoping you've watched my previous other 3 videos on this book series. Look forward to me doing the Circle Opens Quartet in November, along with some Native American stuff, some books, and I do cover some of the Smithsonian's online exhibits. And then some fun stuff in December. You can also check out my previous stuff. I do a lot of more children's book reviews, some film reviews, some secular homeschooling stuff, and some kids-focused travel reviews, mostly of how to travel with planes and cars and that kind of thing. So if you like this, like and subscribe. I have a whole much more planned. Thank you.